The history of geography includes many histories of geography which have differed over time and between different cultural and political groups. In more recent developments, geography has become a distinct academic discipline. Geography derives from the Greek geographia geographia, literally, earth writing, that is, description or writing about the earth. The first person to use the word geographia was Eratosthenes. However, there is evidence for recognizable practices of geography, such as cartography, prior to the use of the term. Egypt. The known world of ancient Egypt saw the Nile as the center, and the world as based upon the river. Various oases were known to the east and west, and were considered locations of various gods. 12. To the south lay the Kushitic region, known as far as the Fourth Cataract. Punt was a region south along the shores of the Red Sea. Various Asiatic peoples were known as Retenu, Kanaan, Harranu, or Khatti. At various times, especially in the Late Bronze Age, Egyptians had diplomatic and trade relationships with Babylonia and Elam. The Mediterranean was called the Great Green, and was believed to be part of a world-encircling ocean. Europe was unknown, although may have become part of the Egyptian worldview in Phoenician times. To the west of Asia lay the realms of Keftiu, possibly Crete, and Mycenae. Babylon. The oldest known world maps date back to ancient Babylon from the 9th century BC. The best known Babylonian world map, however, is the Imago Mundi of 600 BC. The map as reconstructed by Eckhard Unger shows Babylon on the Euphrates, surrounded by a circular landmass showing Assyria, Urartu and several cities, in turn surrounded by a bitter river, with 7 islands arranged around it so as to form a 7-pointed star. The accompanying text mentions 7 outer regions beyond the encircling ocean. The descriptions of 5 of them have survived. In contrast to the Imago Mundi, an earlier Babylonian world map dating back to the 9th century BC depicted Babylon as being further north from the center of the world, though it is not certain what that center was supposed to represent. Greco-Roman World. The ancient Greeks view Homer as the founder of geography. His works the Iliad and the Odyssey are works of literature, but both contain a great deal of geographical information. Homer describes a circular world ringed by a single massive ocean. The works show that the Greeks by the 8th century BC had considerable knowledge of the geography of the eastern Mediterranean. The poems contain a large number of place names and descriptions, but for many of these it is uncertain what real location, if any, is actually being referred to. Thales of Moletis is one of the first known philosophers known to have wondered about the shape of the world. He proposed that the world was based on water, and that all things grew out of it. He also laid down many of the astronomical and mathematical rules that would allow geography to be studied scientifically. His successor Anaximander is the first person known to have attempted to create a scale map of the known world and to have introduced the gnomon to ancient Greece. Hecateus of Malettus initiated a different form of geography. Avoiding the mathematical calculations of Thales and Anaximander, he learned about the world by gathering previous works and speaking to the sailors who came through the busy port of Miletus. From these accounts he wrote a detailed prose account of what was known of the world. A similar work, and one that mostly survives today, is Herodotus Histories. While primarily a work of history, the book contains a wealth of geographic descriptions covering much of the known world. Egypt, Scythia, Persia, and Asia Minor are all described, including a mention of India. The description of Africa as a whole are contentious, with Herodotus describing the land surrounded by a sea. Though he described the Phoenicians as having circumnavigated Africa in the 6th century BC, through much of later European history the Indian Ocean was thought to be an inland sea, the southern part of Africa wrapping around in the south to connect with the eastern part of Asia. This was not completely abandoned by Western cartographers until the circumnavigation of Africa by Vasco da Gama. Some, though, hold that the descriptions of areas such as India are mostly imaginary. Regardless, Herodotus made important observations about geography. He is the first to have noted the process by which large rivers, such as the Nile, build up deltas, and is also the first recorded as observing that winds tend to blow from colder regions to warmer ones. Pythagoras was perhaps the first to propose a spherical world, arguing that the sphere was the most perfect form. This idea was embraced by Plato, and Aristotle presented empirical evidence to verify this. He noted that the Earth's shadow during a lunar eclipse is curved from any angle, and also that stars increase in height as one moves north. Eudoxus of Cnidus used the idea of a sphere to explain how the Sun created differing climatic zones based on latitude. This led the Greeks to believe in a division of the world into 5 regions. At each of the poles was an uncharitably cold region. While extrapolating from the heat of the Sahara, it was deduced that the area around the equator was unbearably hot. Between these extreme regions, both the northern and southern hemispheres had a temperate belt suitable for human habitation. Hellenistic period. These theories clashed with the evidence of explorers, however. Hanno the Navigator had traveled as far south as Sierra Leone, and Egyptian pharaoh Necho II of Africa is related by Herodotus and others as having commissioned a successful circumnavigation of Africa by Phoenician sailors. While they were sailing west around the southern tip of Africa, it was found that the sun was to their right. This is thought to have been a key trigger in the realization that the Earth is spherical in the classical world. In the 4th century BC, the Greek explorer Pythagoras travelled through northeast Europe, and circled the British Isles. He found that the region was considerably more habitable than theory expected, but his discoveries were largely dismissed by his contemporaries because of this. Conquerors also carried out exploration, for example, Caesar's invasions of Britain and Germany, expeditions, invasions sent by Augustus to Arabia, Felix and Ethiopia, and perhaps the greatest ancient Greek explorer of all, Alexander the Great, who deliberately set out to learn more about the East through his military expeditions and so took a large number of geographers and writers with his army who recorded their observations as they moved east. The ancient Greeks divided the world into 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Libya. The Hellespont formed the border between Europe and Asia. The border between Asia and Libya was generally considered to be the Nile River, but some geographers, such as Herodotus, objected to this. Herodotus argued that there was no difference between the people on the east and west sides of the Nile, and that the Red Sea was a better border. The relatively narrow habitable band was considered to run from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to an unknown sea somewhere east of India in the east. The southern portion of Africa was unknown, as was the northern portion of Europe and Asia, so it was believed that they were circled by a sea. These areas were generally considered uninhabitable. The size of the Earth was an important question to the ancient Greeks. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with great precision. Since the distance from the Atlantic to India was roughly known, this raised the important question of what was in the vast region east of Asia and to the west of Europe. Crates of Malus proposed that there were in fact 4 inhabitable landmasses, 2 in each hemisphere. In Rome, a large globe was created depicting this world. Posidonius set out to get a measurement, but his number actually was considerably smaller than the real one, yet it became accepted that the eastern part of Asia was not a huge distance from Europe. Roman period. While the works of almost all earlier geographers have been lost, many of them are partially known through quotations found in Strabo. Strabo's 17-volume work of geography is almost completely extant, and is one of the most important sources of information on classical geography. Strabo accepted the narrow band of habitation theory, and rejected the accounts of Hanno and Pythagoras as fables. None of Strabo's maps survive, but his detailed descriptions give a clear picture of the status of geographical knowledge of the time. Pliny the Elder's Natural History also has sections on geography. A century after Strabo, Ptolemy launched a similar undertaking. By this time the Roman Empire had expanded through much of Europe, and previously unknown areas such as the British Isles had been explored. The Silk Road was also in operation, and for the first time knowledge of the Far East began to be known. Ptolemy Geographia opens with a theoretical discussion about the nature and techniques of geographical inquiry, and then moves to detailed descriptions of much the known world. Ptolemy lists a huge number of cities, tribes, and sites and places them in the world. It is uncertain what Ptolemy names correspond to in the modern world, and a vast amount of scholarship has gone into trying to link Ptolemaic descriptions to known locations. It was the Romans who made far more extensive practical use of geography and maps. The Roman transportation system, consisting of 55,000 miles of roads, could not have been designed without the use of geographical systems of measurement and triangulation. The cursus publicus, a department of the Roman government devoted to transportation, employed full-time grammatici. The surveyor's job was to gather topographical information and then to determine the straightest possible route where a road might be built. Instruments and principles used included sun dials for determining direction, theodolites for measuring horizontal angles, and triangulation, without which the creation of perfectly straight stretches, some as long as 35 miles, would have been impossible. During the Greco-Roman era, those who performed geographical work could be divided into 4 categories. Land surveyors determined the exact dimensions of a particular area, such as a field, dividing the land into plots for distribution, or laying out the streets in a town. Cartographical surveyors made maps, involving finding latitudes, longitudes and elevations. Military surveyors were called upon to determine such information as the width of a river an army would need to cross. Engineering surveyors investigated terrain in order to prepare the way for roads, canals, aqueducts, tunnels and mines. Around AD 400 a scroll map called the Putinger Table was made of the known world, featuring the Roman road network. Besides the Roman Empire, which at that time spanned from Britain to the Middle East and Africa, the map includes India, Sri Lanka and China. Cities are demarcated using hundreds of symbols. It measures 1.12 feet high and 22.15 feet long. The tools and principles of geography used by the Romans would be closely followed with little practical improvement for the next 700 years. India, a vast corpus of Indian texts, embraced the study of geography. The Vedas and Puranas contain elaborate descriptions of rivers and mountains and treat the relationship between physical and human elements. According to religious scholar Diana Eck, a notable feature of geography in India is its interweaving with Hindu mythology. No matter where one goes in India, one will find a landscape in which mountains, rivers, forests, and villages are elaborately linked to the stories and gods of Indian culture. Every place in this vast country has its story, and conversely, every story of Hindu myth and legend has its place. Ancient period. The geographers of ancient India put forward theories regarding the origin of the earth. They theorized that the earth was formed by the solidification of gaseous matter and that the earth's crust is composed of hard rocks, clay and sand. Theories were also propounded to explain earthquakes, and it was assumed that earth, air and water combined to cause earthquakes. The Artha Shastra, a compendium by Kautilya, contains a range of geographical and statistical information about the various regions of India. The composers of the Puranas divided the known world into 7 continents of Dwipas: Jambu Dwipa, Krancha Dwipa, Kusha Dwipa, Plaksha Dwipa, Pushkara Dwipa, Shaka Dwipa and Shalmali Dwipa. Descriptions were provided for the climate and geography of each of the Dwipas. Early medieval period. The Vishnudharmatara Purana contains 6 chapters on physical and human geography. The locational attributes of peoples and places, and various seasons are the topics of these chapters. Varahamihira's Brihat Samhita gave a thorough treatment of planetary movements, rainfall, clouds and the formation of water. The mathematician-astronomer Aryabhata gave a precise estimate of the Earth's circumference in his treatise Aryabhatiya. Aryabhata accurately calculated the Earth's circumference as 24,835 miles, which was only 0.2% smaller than the actual value of 24,902 miles. Late medieval period. The Mughal chronicles Tuik-i Jahangiri, Ain-i Akbari and Dastur-ul-Aml contain detailed geographical narratives. These were based on the earlier geographical works of India and the advances made by medieval Muslim geographers, particularly the work of al-Biruni. China and China. The earliest known geographical Chinese writing dates back to the 5th century BC, during the beginning of the Warring States period. This work was the Yu Gong chapter of the Shu Jing or Book of Documents, which describes the traditional 9 provinces of ancient China, their kinds of soil, their characteristic products and economic goods, their tributary goods, their trades and vocations, their state revenues and agricultural systems, and the various rivers and lakes listed and placed accordingly. The 9 provinces at the time of this geographical work were relatively small in size compared to those of modern China, with the book's descriptions pertaining to areas of the Yellow River, the lower valleys of the Yangtze and the plain between them, as well as the Shandong Peninsula, and to the west the most northern parts of the Wei and Han rivers, along with the southern parts of modern-day Shaanxi province. In this ancient geographical treatise, which would greatly influence later Chinese geographers and cartographers, the Chinese used the mythological figure of Yu the Great to describe the known earth. Apart from the appearance of Yu, however, the work was devoid of magic, fantasy, Chinese folklore, or legend. Although the Chinese geographical writing in the time of Herodotus and Strabo were of lesser quality and contained less systematic approach, this would change from the 3rd century onwards, as Chinese methods of documenting geography became more complex than those found in Europe, a state of affairs that would persist until the 13th century. The earliest extant maps found in archaeological sites of China date to the 4th century BC and were made in the ancient state of Qin. The earliest known reference to the application of a geometric grid and mathematically graduated scale to a map was contained in the writings of the cartographer Pei Shu. From the 1st century AD onwards, official Chinese historical texts contained a geographical section, which was often an enormous compilation of changes in place names and local administrative divisions controlled by the ruling dynasty, descriptions of mountain ranges, river systems, taxable products, etc. The ancient Chinese historian Ban Jiyu most likely started the trend of the gazetteer in China, which became prominent in the Northern and Southern Dynasties period and Sui dynasty. Local gazetteers would feature a wealth of geographic information, although its cartographic aspects were not as highly professional as the maps created by professional cartographers. From the time of the 5th century BC Shu Jing forward, Chinese geographical writing provided more concrete information and less legendary element. This example can be seen in the 4th chapter of the Huainanzi, compiled under the editorship of Prince Luan in 139 BC during the Han dynasty. The chapter gave general descriptions of topography in a systematic fashion, given visual aids by the use of maps due to the efforts of Luan and his associate Zuo Wu. In Chong Chu's Hua Yang Guo Kai of 347, not only rivers, trade routes, and various tribes were described, but it also wrote of a Ba Jun Tu Jing, which had been made much earlier in 150. The Shui Jing was written anonymously in the 3rd century during the Three Kingdoms era, and gave a description of some 137 rivers found throughout China. In the 6th century, the book was expanded to 40 times its original size by the geographers Li Daoyuan, given the new title of Shui Jing Zhu. In later periods of the Song dynasty and Ming dynasty, there were much more systematic and professional approaches to geographic literature. The Song dynasty poet, scholar, and government official Fan Chanda wrote the geographical treatise known as the Gui Hai Yu Hang Kai. It focused primarily on the topography of the land, along with the agricultural, economic and commercial products of each region in China's southern provinces. The polymath Chinese scientist Shen Kuo devoted a significant amount of his written work to geography, as well as a hypothesis of landformation due to the evidence of marine fossils found far inland, along with bamboo fossils found underground in a region far from where bamboo was suitable to grow. The 14th-century Yuan dynasty geographer Na Xin wrote a treatise of archaeological topography of all the regions north of the Yellow River, in his book He Shuo Fang Ji Yu Ji. The Ming dynasty geographer Xu Shaqi traveled throughout the provinces of China to write his enormous geographical and topographical treatise, documenting various details of his travels, such as the locations of small gorges, or mineral beds such as mica schists. Xu's work was largely systematic, providing accurate details of measurement, and his work read more like a 20th-century field surveyor than an early 17th-century scholar. The Chinese were also concerned with documenting geographical information of foreign regions far outside of China. Although Chinese had been writing of civilizations of the Middle East, India, and Central Asia since the traveler Zhang Qian, later Chinese would provide more concrete and valid information on the topography and geographical aspects of foreign regions. The Tang Dynasty Chinese diplomat Wang Xuanci traveled to Magadha during the 7th century. Afterwards he wrote the book Zhang Tian Zhu Guo Tu, which included a wealth of geographical information. Chinese geographers such as Jia Dan wrote accurate descriptions of places far abroad. In his work written between 785 and 805, he described the sea route going into the mouth of the Persian Gulf, and that the medieval Iranians had erected ornamental pillars in the sea that acted as lighthouse beacons for ships that might go astray. Confirming Jia's reports about lighthouses in the Persian Gulf, Arabic writers a century after Jia wrote of the same structures, writers such as al-Masudi and al-Muqaddasi. The later Song dynasty ambassador Xu Jing wrote his accounts of voyage and travel throughout Korea in his work of 1124, the Zan He Feng Shi Gao Li Tu Jing. The geography of medieval Cambodia was documented in the book Gen La Feng Tu Ji of 1297, written by Zhou Deguan. Middle Ages Byzantine Empire and Syria. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, ruled from Constantinople and known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive and produced several noteworthy geographers. Stephanus of Byzantium was a grammarian at Constantinople and authored the important geographical dictionary Ethnica. This work is of enormous value, providing well-referenced geographical and other information about ancient Greece. The geographer Hierocles authored the Synecdoches, in which he provides a table of administrative divisions of the Byzantine Empire and lists the cities in each. The Synecdoches and the Ethnica were the principal sources of Constantine VII's work on the themes or divisions of Byzantium, and are the primary sources we have today on political geography of the 6th century East. George of Cyprus is known for his Descriptio Orbis Romani, written in the decade 600 to 610. Beginning with Italy and progressing counter-clockwise including Africa, Egypt and the western Middle East, George lists cities, towns, fortresses and administrative divisions of the Byzantine or Eastern Roman Empire. Cosmas Indicopleustes, also known as Cosmas the Monk, was an Alexandrian merchant. By the records of his travels, he seems to have visited India, Sri Lanka, the Kingdom of Aksum in modern Ethiopia, and Eritrea. Included in his work Christian topography were some of the earliest world maps. Though Cosmas believed the Earth to be flat, most Christian geographers of his time disagreed with him. Syrian bishop Jacob of Edessa adapted scientific material sourced from Aristotle, Theophrastus, Ptolemy and Basil to develop a carefully structured picture of the cosmos. He corrects his sources and writes more scientifically, whereas Basil's Hexameron is theological in style. Karl Müller has collected and printed several anonymous works of geography from this era, including the Expositio Totius Mundi. Islamic world. In the latter 7th century, adherents of the new religion of Islam surged northward out of Arabia, taking over lands in which Jews, Byzantine Christians and Persian Zoroastrians had been established for centuries. There, carefully preserved in the monasteries and libraries, they discovered the Greek classics, which included great works of geography by Egyptian Ptolemy Almagest and geography, along with the geographical wisdom of the Chinese and the great accomplishments of the Roman Empire. The Arabs, who spoke only Arabic, employed Christians and Jews to translate these and many other manuscripts into Arabic. The primary geographical scholarship of this era occurred in Persia, today's Iran, in the great learning center the House of Wisdom at Baghdad, today's Iraq. Early caliphs did not follow orthodoxy and so they encouraged scholarship. Under their rule, native non-Arabs served as mawali or dhimmi, and most geographers in this period were Syrian or Persian, i.e. of either Zoroastrian or Christian background. Persians who wrote on geography or created maps during the Middle Ages included Habir ibn Hayyan, wrote extensively on many subjects, expanded on the wisdom of the Greek classics and engaged in experimentation in natural science. It is unclear whether he was Persian or Syrian. Al-Khwarizmi wrote The Image of the Earth, in which he used the geography of Ptolemy but improved upon his values for the Mediterranean Sea, Asia, and Africa. Ibn Khaldun authored a book of administrative geography, Book of the Routes and Provinces, which is the earliest surviving Arabic work of its kind. He made the first quadratic scheme map of 4 sectors. Sohrab or Sorkab wrote Marvels of the 7 Climes to the End of Habitation, describing and illustrating a rectangular grid of latitude and longitude to produce a world map. Al-Balkhi founded the Balkhi School of terrestrial mapping in Baghdad. Al-Istakri compiled the Book of the Routes of States. From personal observations and literary sources, Al-Biruni described polar equi-azimuthal equidistant projection of the celestial sphere. Abu Nasr Mansur known for his work with the spherical sign law. His Book of Azimuths is no longer extant. Avicenna wrote on earth sciences in his Book of Healing. Ibn al-Faqih wrote concise Book of Lands. Ibn Rusta wrote a geographical compendium known as Book of Precious Records. Further details about some of these are given below. In the early 10th century, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi, a Persian originally from Balkh, founded the Balkhi School of terrestrial mapping in Baghdad. The geographers of this school also wrote extensively of the peoples, products, and customs of areas in the Muslim world, with little interest in the non-Muslim realms. Surab, a late 10th century Persian geographer, accompanied a book of geographical coordinates with instructions for making a rectangular world map, with equirectangular projection or cylindrical equidistant projection. In the early 11th century, Avicenna hypothesized on the geological causes of mountains in the Book of Healing. In mathematical geography, Persian Abu Rayhan al-Biruni, around 1025, was the first to describe a polar equi-azimuthal equidistant projection of the celestial sphere. He was also regarded as the most skilled when it came to mapping cities and measuring the distances between them, which he did for many cities in the Middle East and western Indian subcontinent. He combined astronomical readings and mathematical equations to record degrees of latitude and longitude and to measure the heights of mountains and depths of valleys, recorded in the chronology of the ancient nations. He discussed human geography and the planetary habitability of the Earth, suggesting that roughly a quarter of the Earth's surface is habitable by humans. He solved a complex geodesic equation in order to accurately compute the Earth's circumference. His estimate of 6,339.9 km for the Earth radius was only 16.8 km less than the modern value of 6,356.7 km. By the early 12th century the Normans had overthrown the Arabs in Sicily. Palermo had become a crossroads for travelers and traders from many nations, and the Norman king Roger II, having great interest in geography, commissioned the creation of a book and map that would compile all this wealth of geographical information. Researchers were sent out and the collection of data took 15 years. Al-Idrisi, one of few Arabs who had ever been to France and England as well as Spain, Central Asia and Constantinople, was employed to create the book from this mass of data. Utilizing the information inherited from the classical geographers, he created one of the most accurate maps of the world to date, the Tabula Rogeriana. The map, written in Arabic, shows the Eurasian continent in its entirety and the northern part of Africa. An adherent of environmental determinism was the medieval Afro-Arab writer al-Jahiz, who explained how the environment can determine the physical characteristics of the inhabitants of a certain community. He used his early theory of evolution to explain the origins of different human skin colors, particularly black skin, which he believed to be the result of the environment. He cited a stony region of black basalt in the northern Najd as evidence for his theory. Medieval Europe during the early Middle Ages, geographical knowledge in Europe regressed, and the simple T&O map became the standard depiction of the world. The trips of Venetian explorer Marco Polo throughout Mongol Empire in the 13th century, the Christian Crusades of the 12th and 13th centuries, and the Portuguese and Spanish voyages of exploration during the 15th and 16th centuries opened up new horizons and stimulated geographic writings. The Mongols also had wide-ranging knowledge of the geography of Europe and Asia, based in their governance and ruling of much of this area, and used this information for the undertaking of large military expeditions. The evidence for this is found in historical resources such as the Secret History of Mongols and other Persian chronicles written in 13th and 14th centuries. For example, during the rule of the Great Yuan dynasty a world map was created and is currently kept in South Korea. See also: Maps of the Yuan dynasty during the 15th century. Henry the Navigator of Portugal supported explorations of the African coast and became a leader in the promotion of geographic studies. Among the most notable accounts of voyages and discoveries published during the 16th century were those by Giambattista Ramusio in Venice, by Richard Hakluyt in England, and by Theodore de Bry in what is now Belgium. Early modern period. Following the journeys of Marco Polo, interest in geography spread throughout Europe. From around c. 1400, the writings of Ptolemy and his successors provided a systematic framework to tie together and portray geographical information. This framework was used by academics for centuries to come, the positives being the lead up to the geographical Enlightenment. However, women and indigenous writings were largely excluded from the discourse. The European global conquest started in the early 15th century with the first Portuguese expeditions to Africa and India, as well as the conquest of America by Spain in 1492, and continued with a series of European naval expeditions across the Atlantic and later the Pacific and Russian expeditions to Siberia until the 18th century. European overseas expansion led to the rise of colonial empires, with the contact between the «Old» and «New World» producing the Columbian Exchange. A wide transfer of plants, animals, foods, human populations, communicable diseases and culture between the continents. These colonialist endeavors in 16th and 17th centuries revived a desire for both accurate, geographic detail, and more solid theoretical foundations. The Geographia Generalis by Bernhardus Varenius and Gerardus Mercator's World Map are prime examples of the new breed of scientific geography. The Waldseemüller Map Universalis Cosmographia, created by German cartographer Martin Waldseemüller in April 1507, is the first map of the Americas in which the name, America, is mentioned. Before this, the Native Americans referred to their land depending on their location, with one of the more commonly used terms being, Abya Yala, meaning, land of vital blood. These indigenous geographical discourses were largely ignored or appropriated by the European colonialists to make way for European thought. The Eurocentric map was patterned after a modification of Ptolemy's second projection but expanded to include the Americas. The Waldseemüller map has been called, America's birth certificate. Waldseemüller also created printed maps called globe gores, that could be cut out and glued to spheres resulting in a globe. This has been debated widely as being dismissive of the extensive Native American history that predated the 16th-century invasion, in the sense that the implication of a «birth certificate» implies a blank history prior. 16th–18th centuries in the West. Geography as a science experiences excitement and exerts influence during the scientific revolution and religion reformation. In the Victorian period, the oversea exploration gave it institutional identity, and geography was the science of imperialism par excellence. Imperialism is a crucial concept for the Europeans, as the institution became involved in geographical exploration and colonial project. Authority was questioned, and utility gained its importance. In the era of Enlightenment, geography generated knowledge and made it intellectually and practically possible as a university discipline. The natural theology required geography to investigate the world as a grand machine from the divine. Scientific voyages and travels constructed geopolitical power from geographical knowledge, partly sponsored by Royal Society. John Pinkerton appraised the 18th century had the gigantic progress of every science, and in particular of geographical information, and alteration has taken place in states and boundaries. The discourse of geographical history gave way to many new thoughts and theories, but the hegemony of the European male academia led to the exclusion of non-Western theories, observations and knowledges. One such example is the interaction between humans and nature, with Marxist thought critiquing nature as a commodity within capitalism. European thought seeing nature as either a romanticized or objective concept differing to human society, and Native American discourse, which saw nature and humans as within one category. The implied hierarchy of knowledge that perpetuated throughout these institutions has only been recently challenged, with the Royal Geographical Society enabling women to join as members in the 20th century. After English Civil War, Samuel Hartlib and his Baconian community promoted scientific application, which showed the popularity of utility. For William Petty, the administrators should be skilled in the best rules of judicial astrology, to calculate the events of diseases and prognosticate the weather. Institutionally, Gresham College propagated scientific advancement to a larger audience like tradesmen, and later this institute grew into Royal Society. William Cunningham illustrated the utilitarian function of cosmography by the military implement of maps. John Dee used mathematics to study location, his primary interest in geography, and encouraged exploiting resource with findings collected during voyages. Religion reformation stimulated geographical exploration and investigation. Philip Melanchthon shifted geographical knowledge production from pages of scripture to experience in the world. Bartholomaeus Keckerman separated geography from theology because the general workings of providence required empirical investigation. His follower, Bernhardus Varenius, made geography a science in the 17th century and published Geographia Generalis, which was used in Newton's teaching of geography at Cambridge. Science develops along with empiricism. Empiricism gains its central place while reflection on it also grew. Practitioners of magic and astrology first embraced and expanded geographical knowledge. Reformation theology focused more on the providence than the creation as previously. Realistic experience, instead of translated from scripture, emerged as a scientific procedure. Geographical knowledge and method play roles in economic education and administrative application, as part of the Puritan social program. Foreign travels provided content for geographic research-informed theories, such as environmentalism. Visual representation, map-making or cartography, showed its practical, theoretical, and artistic value. The concepts of space and place attract attention in geography. Why things are there and not elsewhere is an important topic in geography, together with debates on space and place. Such insights could date back in 16th and 17th centuries, identified by M. Curry as natural space, absolute space, relational space. After Descartes' principles of philosophy, Locke and Leibniz considered space as relative, which has long-term influence on the modern view of space. For Descartes, Gassendi and Newton, place is a portion of absolution space, which are neural and given. However, according to John Locke, our idea of place is nothing else but such a relative position of anything. Distance is the pivot modification of space, because space considered barely in length between any two beings,